In the heart of the galactic assembly, a grand hall filled with shimmering light and voices full of pride and power, leaders from dozens of advanced alien civilizations gathered to discuss a rising concern. A single planet far on the edge of the mapped galaxy had been causing whispers, a planet known by many names but referred to in military records simply as Earth. Harsh and unpredictable, its environment was one of the most violent in the known galaxy. Volcanic activity, shifting weather, disease, predatory species, even the very air and water could turn deadly. A place unfit for any intelligent life, and yet life thrived there. Intelligent life. Human life, the High Commander of the Zx'thriaxians. Dominion leaned forward, his long fingers tapping the polished table before him. His voice was cold but confident as he addressed the gathered leaders, declaring that the time had come to bring Earth under control. He claimed that humans were unruly, disorganized, wild things that had barely touched space, and yet spoke with the arrogance of ancient powers. His words echoed through the room, and many nodded in agreement, thinking the same. What threat could one primitive species pose to the galaxy's oldest empires? Only one voice spoke against the decision, and it belonged to an old traitor named Callan, a being who had once crash-landed on Earth and lived among the humans for several years before being rescued. His voice trembled not with fear but memory. As he told them, they were making a mistake. He warned them that Earth was not like other worlds and that humans were not like other species. He said they were born into chaos and trained by hardship. They did not fear death. They adapted faster than any species he had ever seen. He said they were dangerous not because they wanted war, but because if war came to them, they would stop. At nothing until the threat was destroyed, the room laughed. Not politely but loudly and with mockery. The idea that a species so young, so unevolved by their standards, could pose any kind of threat was laughable to them. Callan was removed from the chamber, and the vote passed quickly. The plan was set. A fleet would be sent to Earth. They would demand surrender. If the humans resisted, they would be crushed in days. Admiral Threx was given command of the invasion. He was a legend among his kind, having led countless successful campaigns. As his fleet of massive warships left the orbit of the Central Command, whirled and jumped into hyperspace, he sat in his command chair and smirked. He expected the mission to be easy. He expected fear, surrender, submission. But Earth had already seen them coming, for months. Human satellites and deep space sensors had picked up strange movements in regions of space that had always been quiet. Signals, distortions, strange engine signatures. It took time, but eventually, analysts put the pieces together. This was not a natural movement of ships. This was a fleet. A fleet headed toward Earth. Governments argued. Military commanders debated, but in the end, they all agreed on one thing. They had to prepare, not for first contact, but for war. The alien fleet arrived in Earth's orbit with precision and power. The skies above the planet filled with shadows cast by metal giants. They broadcast their message across all channels in hundreds of languages. They demanded Earth's surrender. They offered mercy if humanity complied. They promised destruction if resistance was chosen. And Earth went quiet. There was no reply for several long minutes. Then one signal was sent back. It contained no words. No threat, just one image. A single photograph of a human soldier standing beside a crater with an alien scout drone lying in pieces at his feet. His face was calm. His rifle was smoking. Before Admiral Threx could respond, Earth's defense systems activated. Lasers hidden in the sea. Missiles launched from underground bunkers. Satellites turned into orbital weapons. The first wave of alien ships found themselves under attack not from above but from within. They had underestimated Earth's ability to fight in every layer: space, sky, land, sea, and even the digital realm. Their communications were jammed, their targeting systems glitched. And when they sent ground troops, they vanished in forests, mountains, and ruined cities. Not because humans were more powerful, but because they were unpredictable. The fleet was designed to fight empires, not survivors. Not beings who had fought each other for thousands of years and learned to adapt to every kind of weapon and threat. Humans moved without rules. They struck at night. They used traps. They attacked supply lines. They faked surrender only to ambush. They poisoned water. They used EMPs. They hacked drones mid-flight. They fought with everything and expected nothing in return. Admiral Threx watched from his ship's window as one of his capital cruisers fell from the sky, spinning in flames, crashing into the ocean, and sending shockwaves across the coast. His officers panicked. His strategies failed. No simulation had ever prepared them for this. He ordered a retreat, not a surrender. Just a tactical withdrawal to regroup. But it was already too late. The humans had followed them. Not in massive ships, but in small crafts packed with explosives, stealth systems, and minds that thought like hunters. For the first time in his long military life, Threx understood something he had never believed possible. He had woken a sleeping world, and what rose to meet him was not a scared, primitive race, but a world of fighters forged by pain and perfected by survival. This was a death world not because of its environment, but because of its people. And they had just declared war. Admiral Threx stood at the center of his ship's command, deck staring at the burning curve of Earth as smoke trails marked the sky. And the once confident fleet hovered in confusion and rising fear. The plan had been simple and swift, but everything had turned upside down within hours of arrival. He had underestimated the Deathworlders, and now the cost was rising with every breath. Humanity had not answered with negotiations nor with desperation. They had answered with precision and fury. The initial orbital assault had taken the invaders by surprise, but what came after was even more alarming. Cities did not fall as expected. Instead, they turned into traps layered with resistance. Soldiers came not in uniform formations, but in scattered units that struck from rooftops, from sewers, from the shattered remains of buildings. They moved like ghosts and never followed patterns. They used old weapons and strange tools, but every attack was precise and personal. They had studied their enemy while being studied themselves, and in that difference lay their advantage. Threx had deployed ground troops across key urban centers thinking they could seize control quickly. His officers reported the first landings with pride, but within minutes that pride turned to silence and silence turned to screams. The humans had watched them land and let them land, and then they closed in from every direction. They knew the terrain and used it like a weapon. Streets turned to tunnels of fire. Skyscrapers became sniper towers. Every shadow hid a trap. Every wall hid a fighter. The invaders had shields and armor, but the humans had knowledge of their own cities and used it with a kind of madness that made even seasoned alien commanders question the mission. Tanks disappeared in sinkholes. Walkers were pulled apart by magnetized traps and explosives. Drones were hacked mid-flight and redirected toward their own fleets. Even food supplies brought down from orbit were poisoned not by chemicals, but by bacteria the aliens had no immunity against. The humans knew they were fighting giants, but they fought with the cold confidence of those who had never expected to live forever anyway. In one ruined city by the sea, a squad of elite alien soldiers moved through the streets looking for survivors or resistance. They found silence. Buildings leaned against each other like broken teeth. The wind carried ash and the hum of distant sirens. One of them signaled for the group to split and check nearby buildings. Inside the wreckage of an old museum, they found strange art and statues of warriors from human history. They paused to observe, but too late they realized the place was not abandoned. The walls came alive. Figures rose from behind displays. Traps activated. Explosions rang out. The squad was gone in under 2 minutes. Above Earth, the orbit was no longer safe. Human fighter crafts too small for long detection, zipped between capital ships and destroyed. Their engines with stolen tech mixed with scrap metal. Cargo haulers, retrofitted with fusion drives, slammed into larger cruisers and took them down in suicide runs. And among the chaos, human signals filled the air, not with distress, but with war cries, music, and defiance. They mocked the invaders over open frequencies. They told stories. They laughed while bleeding. They named their operations after old myths and dark humor. Operation Thorn in the Eye. Operation Welcome to Hell. Operation Goodbye Breakfast. There was madness in their method and method in their madness. Admiral Threx called an emergency council with fleet commanders, but found half of them no longer responded. Some were lost. Some refused orders. Some had simply disappeared. The chain of command was crumbling, and no protocol could explain it. He stared at the battlefield maps and saw only red, the mark of human resistance. Even areas marked as clear were slowly blinking back into conflict. The humans would not stay down. They would not fall. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought like they had nothing left to lose. That made them dangerous. That made them a nightmare. On the outskirts of what had once been a peaceful farmland now turned battleground, a young human commander stood with a small group of fighters. They had lost contact with several squads, but their morale had not broken. He looked up at the sky, saw the wreckage of an alien vessel falling like a meteor, and simply said they were doing fine. His hands were dirty, his face was tired, but his eyes held no fear. Around him were men and women from different nations and backgrounds, but in that moment, they were one force driven by the same truth. Survival required unity and retaliation. The aliens tried to regroup. They tried to predict the next human move, but each time they were met with chaos that could not be predicted. The humans were not playing the game the aliens knew. They were writing new rules with every breath. They hit supply chains. They jammed signals. They made fake transmissions that led fleets into traps. They used old satellites as weapons. They lured capital ships into low orbit and shot them down with technology no one thought a primitive world could possess. And every time the aliens thought they had an advantage, they realized it had been planted by the enemy. Threx finally gave the order to fall back to the outer layer of orbit and reassess. He did not call it retreat. His pride would not allow it. But inside he knew this was not a battle they could win in days. Perhaps not at all. He thought of the stories he had ignored, the warnings he had laughed at, the old traitor who had said the humans adapt faster than anyone. He looked now and saw the truth. Humans had turned an invasion into a hunt. They had flipped weakness into strategy. They had become something else, not just survivors, but punishers. And the worst part was they had just begun. The smoke that once rose from Earth's cities no longer meant loss. It meant retaliation. The alien coalition had begun to understand what it truly meant to invade a death world, and now fear had begun to grow in the places where arrogance once ruled. Admiral Threx, who had once believed in a quick and clean domination of this strange planet, now sat in silence within his personal chamber. The war reports arriving by the hour were filled with confusion, panic, and words that did not belong in any military record. Unknown tactics, unseen movements, psychological warfare, disappearances, sabotage, even defections among their own ranks. The Deathworlders had changed everything. Threx had sent hundreds of scouts to map human positions. Few returned, and those who did came back changed. They spoke of ambushes in deep forests where humans moved without sound. They described narrow caves where shadows themselves turned into traps. In deserts, they found illusions created by heat and mirrors. In cities, they saw buildings collapse in perfect rhythm, as if the entire structure had been turned into a weapon. Even the oceans were unsafe. Human divers attacked supply carriers under the waves using handmade devices strapped to their chests. There were no patterns, no mercy, no end, Among the chaos, a group of human operatives began a mission that would change the course of the war. It was not ordered by any global government. There was no unified council. It was planned between commanders, sharing encrypted messages through old satellites and buried cables. A team of 15 individuals chosen for their skill and not their rank gathered in an abandoned spaceport hidden in a mountain range. Their task was simple in words but near impossible in action. They were to infiltrate an alien command ship orbiting above the Pacific and take control of its communication systems. The plan was desperate, but desperation had long since become routine for them. They launched in a stealth craft built from stolen alien parts, mixed with human engineering, and carried nothing that would signal a normal attack. Once aboard the ship, they used captured uniforms and recycled codes to move through the halls. The aliens had grown lazy and disoriented and never expected an attack from inside. In under an hour, the humans reached the broadcast chamber and did something no one believed possible. They hijacked the network used by the entire alien coalition to deliver one message to every fleet and every planet within range. The screen showed the face of a human wearing a broken helmet, his eyes bloodied but burning with focus. His voice was calm and steady, and each word was spoken like law. He said the coalition came to Earth believing it could tame the wild. It came with pride, with science, with superiority. But it found something it could not calculate. It found humanity. And now it would face the price. He told them this was not a war of conquest, not a war of expansion. This was a response, a reminder, that some fires should never be touched, that some beasts do not sleep. He gave them a choice. Leave Earth or face the consequences. The broadcast ended and silence fell across space. What followed was not silence on Earth. It was thunder. Human forces pushed back with fire in their veins. Cities that had once burned with defeat now burned with resistance. Factories turned into weapon foundries. Hospitals became command centers. Civilians became scouts. Farmers became engineers. Children ran messages. Elders taught history and survival. There was no pause, no delay. Humanity had become a single storm moving with purpose and pain. And the coalition felt it at every front. Some alien commanders began to question the mission. They had signed up for glory, not extinction. Reports of entire fleets vanishing in asteroid belts or being ambushed near moons filled the strategic boards. Alien pilots refused to fly near Earth's atmosphere. Ground troops refused to deploy without triple support. Morale was cracking. Some species within the coalition began pulling back their ships. Some left entirely. They did not say it. But they knew. The war was already lost. In orbit, Admiral Threx could barely maintain order. His own officers whispered of abandoning the campaign. One commander tried to seize control and was arrested. Another vanished from his quarters without a trace. Drones, meant to watch humans, were instead hacked and turned against their owners. Even the stars felt hostile now. No place near Earth felt safe. The Admiral finally ordered the fleet to retreat to the edge of the solar system to rebuild. But even that order came too late. From Earth came a new wave of small crafts built for speed and destruction. They had no names, no insignias. They moved like shadows and hit like thunder. They targeted only command ships and fuel stations. They did not fight for land. They fought for damage. Each mission was fast, brutal, and effective. They left messages in the debris, symbols drawn in human blood and paint. Some of the messages were ancient human quotes. Others were personal. A single word repeated across wreckage after wreckage. Remember. A turning point came when a human commander led a direct attack on an alien war council held in orbit above Mars. The humans had learned of the meeting through intercepted messages and used a single repurposed mining ship to breach the outer shell of the station. What followed was chaos. Human fighters poured into the station from unexpected angles. The aliens responded with automatic defense, but found their systems had been altered. They had been fighting on human terms since the beginning. And now they were dying on human terms too. By the time the Council realized the danger, it was already too late. Explosions rocked the station, and only one survivor made it out with a broken arm and a broken mind. He spoke later to his superiors with shaking hands and hollow eyes. He said the humans did not come with rage or madness. They came with cold, calm purpose. Like surgeons cutting away infection, they came to end the war. And they would not stop. On Earth, the skies were clearer now. The humans stood among their ruins but no longer felt broken. They felt powerful. They knew the galaxy was watching. And they knew the message was spreading. This was not a planet to be conquered. This was not a species to be enslaved. This was a death world. And they were its children. When the humans first defended Earth, the galaxy thought it was nothing more than luck, or perhaps desperation turned into blind fury. But as time passed and battle after battle shifted in their favor, something darker and deeper became clear. Something that reached far beneath the surface of war strategy and numbers. This was no longer about survival. This was not simply the act of defending a home. This had become something else, a campaign of relentless force driven not by pride or conquest, but by a deep, unforgiving memory of what it meant to be invaded. The ruins of a fallen orbital station above Jupiter. Human engineers worked in silence, their hands steady, their minds focused. They were not soldiers yet. They worked as if the war depended on every wire, every bolt, every line of code. Their mission was to repair and rearm captured alien tech and turn it into weapons for Earth's retaliation. Every new ship they launched into the stars carried parts of both worlds, steel forged by Earth circuitry, shaped by stolen science and souls that had seen too much fire to ever sleep again. Across the outer planets, old mining colonies once thought useless began transforming into outposts of human resistance command centers, black sites and secret hangars filled with modified crafts, capable of striking deep into the territory of the coalition. What was once a frightened planet had now become the center of a rising force, not because of wealth, not because of technology, but because of its people and the fire that burned in their blood. The humans did not stop at defending. They moved outward like a tide. They hunted every trace of the invaders across nearby systems. Striking without warning, sometimes without sound, they appeared on moons and asteroid fields where alien ships hid, believing they could escape the reach of a primitive species. But the Deathworlders came, and when they did, nothing was left untouched. Every outpost, every fleet, every weapon cache was destroyed with a precision that shocked even the most experienced. Alien commanders in one distant system where a remaining coalition force had taken shelter, a signal arrived. It was short and simple. No threats, no declaration, just a time and a place. The alien commander laughed at the idea that humans would dare face them directly, but when that time came, their scanner showed nothing. At first, no ships, no movement, just the silence of space, until one by one black dots appeared on their radar, then more and more, until the entire map filled with heat signatures. Small, fast, impossible to track, and by the time they reacted, the sky exploded. Deathworlders did not fight for territory. They fought to erase danger, and when they struck completely. No survivors, no escape, no second chances. They understood their enemy now, but more importantly, they had learned to turn fear into fuel, pain into power, loss into focus. And with every fallen comrade, they carried the memory forward like armor. They never forgot the faces of those who died in the first wave. And they carried those faces with them into every battle. Admiral Threx, who had once commanded an empire, now lived in shadow. His face no longer shone to his own fleet. His orders carried without voice or presence. His name whispered only in anger. And now he had become a ghost in a war that had turned against him. Every system he visited showed signs of human sabotage, ships with missing supplies, stations with corrupted AI, entire colonies lost with no trace. Just a single message burned into walls or carved into metal: never attack a Deathworld. His advisors pleaded for peace. His scientists searched for answers. His generals abandoned him one by one. Some disappeared, others surrendered entire divisions to the humans, hoping to be spared. But the Deathworlders were not seeking surrender. They were not looking for peace talks or treaties. They had no interest in politics. They wanted one thing, and one thing only: an end to the threat that had once pointed its weapons at Earth. One of the captured alien commanders was brought to a hidden human base and interrogated, not with pain or machines, but with truth. The humans showed him footage of the cities that had been bombed, the families that had been broken, the children that had died in the crossfire. They asked him why the Coalition thought Earth would fall, why they believed a planet raised by storms and fire would submit to order and rule. He had no answers, only silence, and that silence said more than any confession. In the central systems of the galaxy, word began to spread. Colonies far from Earth that once feared the Deathworlders now watched with awe and caution. Some began to copy their tactics. Others tried to open quiet communication, offering technology or information in exchange for safety, and slowly the humans began to reshape the way the galaxy thought, not through diplomacy, but through unbreakable presence. A group of human soldiers boarded a massive dreadnought hidden in a dust cloud near a binary star system and disabled its core. With nothing but hand tools and internal sabotage, they left no trace except a single transmission played over the main speaker. It was the voice of a child reading an old Earth poem, and it echoed through the dying ship as fire consumed it line by line. The Deathworlders had not just learned to fight in space, they had learned to haunt it on Earth. The world had changed in ways no one had imagined. The nations no longer argued, the borders no longer mattered. People shared food, ideas, weapons, and dreams. They trained together, they built together, they remembered together. Every story of survival became a lesson. Every broken wall became a symbol of what they had endured and what they would never allow again. And at the center of it all stood a single monument, not of steel or gold, but of stone carved by hand. It stood on the ruins of the first city to be attacked, and on its face were only 7 words, carved deep enough to last 1,000 years. We are Earth, and we do not kneel. The galaxy had learned fear, but more than that, it had learned respect. The Deathworlders had not come to dominate, they came to finish what had been started. And they would not rest until the fire that reached for Earth was turned into dust. The Coalition was nearly broken, its power shattered, its fleets scattered, and in the silence that followed, every surviving species asked the same question: what kind of world gives birth to warriors like these? And the answer remained the same every time: a death world that had once promised glory to the alien Coalition now lay in ruins. Scattered across stars and silence, where once massive fleets moved with pride, now only debris floated without direction. And the proud banners of domination had faded into shadows. Earth had not only survived it, had changed everything. It had turned the galaxy's fear into a lesson, and every planet now knew that the Deathworlders were not to be touched, not to be provoked, and never to be underestimated. In the far reaches of space, a final fortress remained hidden on the dark side of a frozen moon, buried deep underground and protected by old technology. The last remaining leaders of the once great Coalition had gathered there, hoping to regroup and rebuild in secret, hoping that the humans would never find them. They spoke in hushed tones, made plans with trembling voices, and avoided eye contact as they remembered the faces of those who had vanished before them. They knew what was coming, even if they refused to say it aloud. But the Deathworlders had already found them. They did not arrive with horns or noise or fleets that darkened the sky. They came as shadows moving through silence, slipping through systems, bypassing defenses until they were inside the walls. Before any alarms could sound, the power failed. Before any soldier could reach a weapon, the gravity flickered and died. The floors cracked with strange sounds and cold air rushed in, and before the Coalition leaders could react, they found themselves surrounded not by thousands, but by a handful of human operatives, wearing gear mixed from dozens of species, moving with a calm that only came from certainty. There were no threats, no speeches, only a single device placed in the center of the council room and activated. A projection filled the space, showing cities Rebuilt lives restored children, running through fields once burned to ash, and then came the voice steady strong. Unmistakably human, speaking not just to the leaders in that room, but to every listening station across the stars, said that Earth did not begin this war. Earth did not seek revenge or conquest. Earth was invaded, and Earth responded, and now the response was complete. The voice explained that the Deathworlders would not chase those who no longer posed a threat. They would not destroy for the sake of pride. They had fought not to rise above the galaxy, but to show it something it had forgotten. To remind every system, every empire, every species that peace was not given. It was protected and earned. Message ended with words that would be carved into 1,000 walls. Across planets, moons, and stations, it said, if you come to Earth with peace, you will find friends. If you come with chains, you will find nothing but fire and silence. The device deactivated, and the human team disappeared into the ice, leaving behind no sign of violence, only silence and a choice. And the coalition leaders, who had once dreamed of dominion, sat quietly with no answers, no strength, and no direction. Their war was over not through treaty or negotiation, but through total understanding. Back on Earth, the skies had returned to blue, the rivers ran clean again, and the buildings once broken were being rebuilt not with haste, but with care. The people no longer lived in fear, but in quiet unity. The nations had changed, their flags still flew, but they flew beside one another, not above the children, no longer. Learned only history and science, but also what it meant to be a protector, not just of land but of honor. They learned that Earth had bled not because it was weak, but because it was willing to bleed for something greater. In a mountain range where the first alien ship had fallen and scorched the ground, a new monument was being built, not by machines, but by hands, by people who had seen too much to let memory fade. It was not a monument of revenge, but of truth, and on its surface were names, not just of humans, but also of the few aliens who had stood against the coalition and joined the defense, who had seen the humans not as animals, but as allies, and who had paid for that belief with their lives. A child asked his grandfather why the stars no longer carried the threat they once did, and the old man smiled and said, because the stars remember what happened when they forgot what Earth was, and far beyond Earth and the systems that had once called it a savage place, whispers still moved from market to market, from captain to captain, from elder to child. They spoke of the Deathworlders, of their rage, of their fire, of their mercy, and of the message they left behind: never attack a death world, never wake the humans, never mistake silence for weakness again. Some said Earth would fade into legend. Some believed it had already become something more than real, something eternal. But for those who had seen it, who had fought it or fought beside it, they knew the truth. Earth was not legend. Earth was warning. Earth was memory. Earth was a mirror showing what could happen when the overlooked rise and stand and never fall again. And in the quiet command rooms of new empires and distant colonies, maps were redrawn, patrols were routed, plans were rewritten, and always with one rule at the center of every command: never go near the blue planet, the one with storms and stories and unbreakable hearts. Never test the Deathworlders again. War was over, but the lesson remained written in sky, in stone, in blood, and in history. And that was how Earth changed the galaxy, not with power but with proof, not with speeches but with survival, not with promises but with action. This was why attacking the Deathworlders was a fatal mistake, and now the galaxy would never forget it. The end.